invite all of our speakers to join us up here for our Q&A session. So maybe just to kick things off, I think from all of our presenters, we heard about a range of more formal to more informal collaborative training programs and opportunities. From the more formal, from certificates to masters in regulatory science and regulatory affairs to even some PhD programs, and then the informal opportunities from fellowships and modules, case studies, and I guess particularly from Sesha and as well as colleagues from FDA, where you see needs in that formal versus informal or some combination, both for future workforce, but also, I guess, your current workforce as well. Maybe Sesha or Catherine, thank you.
Is on? Hey, perfect. So currently, in terms of what we're seeing, and I'm coming from the laboratory view, having that mix of informal and formal is very useful to us. So having a couple of, having interactions where we have that structured environment and people are coming and they're already prepared for what they're going to see. They understand some of the process. That's one aspect of it. But then you have people that are completely new to the process and being able to show them and kind of open their horizons for that. They both have worked very well. And in terms of the laboratory, of course, we're always happy to get anyone to come and help work. And so having that mix is actually very, very dynamic.
I completely agree. I think even in the context of how we run our fellowship, there is a formal structured component where the students come in and they have to follow a mentor and a project and all of that. But we also encourage them very highly to talk to others. I mean, they're not just doing what they were supposed to be doing. They have access to other scientists. They have access to other labs. They can learn things in a more informal setting as well. So, and we don't insist on it. It's up to each student to explore and find out more. But the opportunity is there. But and I think a lot of students actually take advantage of both elements. The structure provides them a good context and helps them learn, and the informal aspect, is where they gravitate towards where their interests are. So I think both of them is necessary.
I want to say a few things about quantity rather than quality. The quality, of course, it's very important, but I think in the upcoming years we are going to deal with a large growth in the quantity of people need to learn, need to change profession, and even quantity of the products that will be released to the market. So I'm not sure that the traditional way of mentoring, teaching, as I said in my call, will be able to meet this growing need. So maybe we need to switch and make some change of more radical change in paradigm to see how we are going to deal with this very fast growth in need to education, training, and things so on. I think in Europe there are many projects encouraging people even to share laboratories, centers of training to be online, to be accessible online, to run some sort of experiments even online. And furthermore, we need to see if we can invest more in online education or hybrid education, and make people more autodidact. I mean, this will be the name of the game in the future decades, because there is no way that the traditional face-to-face or even hybrid learning teaching methods will be able to meet this growing need for education, gaining knowledge, and so on.
Yeah, it's probably on. Okay, you can hear me well. I can hear myself well. opportunity to leverage new ways of training and teaching is important, also in the consideration of the stimulation. And I don't know if Sisha, from the experience of Alajan, can confirm that, but I always have observed that when you engage people who do this and have an expertise in a particular field, when you engage them to some extent in training and teaching responsibilities, it has an intense stimulation effect on their own way of thinking about what they are doing, number one, and also I think on their general performance as professionals. As such, this is an opportunity that we like to leverage also through the CERSI program, where we send our staff into the universities making contributions to the training programs with their expertise, but also help shape the programs towards the highest priorities as these evolve and as science and technology changes so rapidly. That's something that is stimulation from both sides, and of course engaging some of the stakeholders like industry into the process on a platform that we as an agency can be engaged in is a wonderful opportunity that we cherish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always said to my staff, teaching is the best way of learning. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes. I think, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Very interesting talks, thank you very much, and I'm really excited to see all the opportunities that there are. I was missing, however, the component in the bachelors. I've only heard it mentioned in one of the talks in the pharmaceutical bachelor, and I have the feeling that all the diplomas and the masters are the people that are really interested in learning about it, but then you don't reach the people that maybe need to know about it, but it wouldn't even cross their minds. So, do you expect to go into other life sciences bachelors, or is this not a priority at all? Or how will this develop? Because I'm now talking to some people that interact with the regulators and have been interacting for a long time, basic researchers that have then great ideas, and they really, some of these ideas die because they don't know how to bring them forward. And I think just a very simple, basic, it doesn't need to be long, training during the bachelor about all these topics would be really useful. Are there any movements in that direction?
I showed you the bachelor at University of Copenhagen in pharmacy, and a beginning here is to start to stimulate students towards regulatory science very early on. And I would also say that I'd also see those elements being built in other programs, even for engineering and so on. So I think we will see a shift in terms of how, what content of the education being provided to different lines of education and professions going into the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry. So it's a trend, it's ongoing, and I think we will see more of that as we go on.
The fellowship program I described is not just limited to pharmaceutical sciences or regulatory sciences. We get a lot of engineers. We actually target a lot of engineers. A few other life sciences maybe, but there's no restriction. But what we also run is, what I didn't talk about is, we also run a program more in the summer, in a short term, 3 months to 6 months sometimes, for all bachelor students. And so, it's not just restricted to life sciences. That we get a lot of students from business degrees, even arts degrees, because in the industry, marketing research is a huge component of it. And so you don't need necessarily life sciences, but more of a business type of a mindset. So we hit a lot of disciplines and give people opportunities to learn about the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry, and we always say, and if you look at all the people in a big pharmaceutical company and map their educational background, you can go to any large university and practically every department will have somebody in the pharmaceutical company. So it's not restricted to research. Some of the research and development are restricted to life sciences, but in the industry, it's much broader than that.
Per?
Yeah. And in continuation of that, I would say that it's when we talk about regulatory science and competence development, we talk about competence development in a very broad sense because it's multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder rich. Business is one of the elements that coming in. You have legal, you have ethics, you have humanities. So I think the trend will be that there will be a clear understanding to get those stakeholders on board in terms of the competence development and the cross-disciplinary approach to many of the things. If you look at the patients, which is always in the center, the UPATI project that we have in Europe, and I've been part of that project as in the executive committee and training and what have you. So that's very unique because that's actually training of the patient communities in regulatory science. It's not to make patient experts, but it's to raise the competence level in the patient communities, enabling to play a better part or being engaged and involved in the different decision-making processes, both in industry, in regulatory, in academic research, in clinical research, and so on. And that's very unique in terms of that. So we have a diploma program for those patient representatives. It's ongoing. I think there's a new cohort of students coming up this fall. That would be the third cohort of diploma students with patient representatives. But very important for the program is also the larger outreach to lay people, to journalists, to all these kinds of people with the UPATI toolbox, which is an online information box with neutral language in terms of how things are explained. So it's informational on a neutral platform, and it's been developed through a very complex system of ethical reviews and what have you, and also in a language, and this is important, when we go outside our pharmacist, or I'm a veterinary surgeon, when we go outside our own profession, the language to reach to patients is so important. So the competence race is really also to get those communities up, and it's not what you think of, it's actually to talk the same language so they actually understand what you're talking about and trying to how you explain it. So that's actually the competence lift that I'm talking about, sort of in the full umbrella that's important here. Patients first.
Catherine?
Yeah, I cannot emphasize this enough because as we all have discussed how critical it is to include patients in our decision-making processes and also to speed innovation to better products that come to patients. We have to educate patients about it, and it's not, it's such a critical component, particularly in our times now where we rely on the patient feedback in such an enhanced way that that's really critical, and we need to figure out how to do this effective. And I think you have really done already a lot of work in this direction that we can build on also in the US.
The thing is, this already been done in a way in social media. I mean, a patient before goes to the physicist today, goes to internet to check what are the symptoms of the disease and learn something about it. So we already have it in a way on the web and social media, but you should make more efforts maybe to be present on this social media, so the information there should be more reliable.
So I just want to loop back to the undergraduate question. So in terms of the lab-based, FDA welcomes, at least my office welcomes 30 to 50 undergraduate students, so bachelor level, as well as high-performing high school students, to the FDA starting next week, to do a variety of things. And to the point, it's not just scientists that's at the point. We're looking at people that have interest in public relations, business management, to really get them involved in kind of the government process. And we track them over the years because usually they ask us for recommendation letters to go on and see where they go on. And some people will go on to either pharmacy careers or higher level science careers. We've had a couple that said, this was nuts, I'm never going to go into science again. There have been few, but there's been a couple. But it is, I mean, it's a really good way to get involvement of that, of the base.
Beat, did you still have a question?
Well, maybe it's totally naive. When Jack said it will not be possible anymore to go face to face, I just felt this is in the complexity of the whole topic. You can look at complexity like a cup, and you put it to the ground and it breaks, and then when you put it together back, you will miss some parts always. So that is not the way to simplify. But if you simplify, I think if you take this, what is discussed here, but this is a professional a lack, because I only know that. I would suggest, after listening to this and only part because I had to be in another session, we should spend a whole day, and a whole day in a plenary session. In a plenary session for all those who would attend such a conference as ours, but maybe also other conferences, where you make a layout where you say people in industry doing business are approached, people in research are approached, and where you really would have the regulators and the people with lots of competence, like this table here, putting together, maybe with us or maybe with someone else, a whole day where you reach different target groups. And I think what my problem always has been personally, but I see it also in other persons who are maybe everyone who still knows what a typewriter is has a kind of a problem with the fact that you are you read overloads of information. When you go to FDA, it's hard after 2 hours to continue what you are reading, because the overload is so huge, and you cannot take it even in a doses where you cannot ask your computer, hey, what was that what I read? So that is really the complexity of what you are discussing here is so big that I would vote for it. Ask 100 foundations and organizers of summits to include a whole day only on that. I mean,
I think that would be an
just a
interesting
proposal.
discussion. Yes. Maybe one final question. I know we're running out of time. Yes.
So if you look at everything that is said, clearly we're talking here at this conference about an emerging technology, but there are many different emerging and converging technologies. We face this problem of getting our arms around it, as I was on President Obama's PCAS panel for assessment of nano, and became clear to us at an early stage of our assessment we had to make a vote. Should nano stimulus and funding continue? And it was very difficult to get data for nano industries because they never emerged, but what did emerge was nano-enabled and entire new technologies through converging technologies. And listen to the discussion here about all the needs that exist, and you look at what is currently happening, say, for instance, in the world of nanosafety, the inappropriate world of nanotoxicology, as people call it, as that era of funding is over, those people are now aimlessly drifting at a time period when we have a dire need for the converging technologies to actually assemble task forces to look, because the future is going to look more and more to the past, where these large areas of uncertainties exist. So my question is then, if you need a workforce, what is being done actually to declare what the workforce is and what will be done, so that people from inception know that there is a need and a path that they can follow, instead of trying to pull out the path in little areas of revealment as you walk through, but there is no clear how many people worldwide is going to be needed now in the converging technologies. Can we give that a number? And can they then put the components together in order to say, listen, there are jobs and careers out here. Otherwise, we will be assembling complex knowledge from point to time, and then we look around and say, how are we going to deal with this? Instead of looking and realizing it is a road, we can see that road, give that road a name, give it numbers, and then, let us proceed from that way.
And Neil, did you have a specific comment to that? Yeah.
I'll just take 1 minute. Specific comment is, FDA has hundreds of ORISE postdoc fellows every year. We can't afford thousands. And that's a big number. If you look at all of FDA, undergraduates, Catherine mentioned 25 in her own office within CEDAR. But if you look at all the centers within FDA and NCTR, we have hundreds of undergraduate students, interns every summer. And that's a big number. And then, so that is, I think, plenty of training for students, undergraduate students, and those that go through PhD programs and postdocs. But then in the context of clinical nanomedicine, if the question is, and these things came up yesterday, is for the SMEs, academics who try to get the concepts into clinical trials, they don't understand the regulatory aspect. And that's why most things fail. Same thing with small and SMEs. They make so many mistakes because they don't understand the regulatory aspect. And so it's very difficult for them to push that. And then that doesn't happen with the large pharmaceutical companies. Even though they make mistakes, it's not on the basics of regulatory science. So I think if there is program, and Jack brought up a very good point. Now everything is on the internet. If there is a way that these things can be provided on the internet, either through the regulatory agencies that say these are the basics and this is how you go through. I know it's not easy from FDA that I can tell you, but that is going to be more useful apart from university training in other areas.
Frank, maybe final comment, and then we should close, I think.
I think, to your point, predictions are difficult, particularly when they're about the future, and I said that. So the responsibility for the agency in the area is often focused towards the near-term goals, and people become very anxious when they're asked for long-term predictions and projections in order to design programmatic, didactic, and systematic programs to address changes in the workforce qualification, numbers of things in particular areas. So I don't think as a society we are particularly good at it. It also has to do with the fact that with all the data that we collect, we still don't understand how to develop meaningful models for it to do predictions and simulations of different situations for different scenarios as particular technologies advance. And I think that plays into your question to say, okay, where is the strategy and who is going to develop the strategy? So for now it's a patchwork, but we also can design the patchwork in a somewhat iterative process, as many of systems are interactive and somewhat self-regulating. So I think there will be a mix of that where demand and opportunity comes together, and I think the autodidactic component of the learning and also of the opportunity to provide expertise from people who, for whatever reason, work in a particular field, having access to those subject matter experts, one of the things you proposed, and I think is a very important component that we are struggling with our agency, is what you call the yellow pages of expertise, individuals that can be involved in those processes and in a way called upon on demand. Right now we are not particularly good at that. It usually takes us a while to get it done. But again, to build platform programs, I think we need to also consider that students only can be successful if they have a basis to stand on. And I think there is some basic education required, coming back to the question how early to engage into particular regulatory process question. Of course, any patient would need some information and some basic understanding how research and medical development actually proceeds and how is innovation driven in the field of medicine, particularly then when some of the medical problems are not addressed. I think any individual gains an interest in that. And yet we don't have a solution or a completely structured process. It's also driven by market and economic interests of different entities. And as such, I think the opportunity to organize information, be able to search information, also through the help with machine learning and artificial intelligence, is something that we need to seriously consider. And FDA has a significant interest in it also because we have to deal with vast amount of information that we get from all kinds of areas in industry and the public domain, and sift through this to extract that what we need at that particular time. And I think we also should provide the opportunity for students to do this on an individual basis and ask them to solve problems and give them the freedom to choose what resources they use for it, because there are different talents and different preferences how individuals learn. Some are more visual, others are more interactive in groups. Some do this very isolated to some extent, leveraging a lot of information. So I'm not sure what the future of education is going to look like specifically, but I think we need to consider a variety and a spectrum of tools, and we need to help develop them and drive them, I would say, in parallel to the extent that we can put resources into this. I'm not sure if this is a good conclusion, but one of the components of that, what I want to say is that this interaction, of course, requires networking and communication, and it also from time to time requires face-to-face meetings, and as Beat pointed out, maybe there's opportunity to consider if one should not think from time to time to bring critical components or interest groups together to discuss what we can do together, particularly in areas where no single entity's resources are enough to reach a new level and a new quality of either information or training material that we can build and build the future on it.
Thank you, Frank. I think we'll have to stop there. I know our plenary is getting started, so please thank our speakers again. Thank you.